So this will make sense, I promise. But I want to tell you about a project that my wife Karen and I have got. We are digging out a section of knee wall and dirt in our backyard. It's a totally useless short wall. It's not, there's a big wall that goes out, and it's got a pretty tree and stuff. And then it comes in and then it goes out, but not as much. And there's nothing you can plant there. And it's stupid. Like, it just doesn't need to be there. It looks weird and out of place. And we're hoping to replace it with raised garden beds. We're hoping that some of you are going to teach us how to garden in Arizona. But first, we need to dig out the old stuff. So of course we started this project in May, and it turns out that digging and schlepping, digging dirt around in Arizona summers is hot. And it turns out that the dirt here in Arizona is hard. So we've been doing one wheelbarrow at a time, sometimes one per day, sometimes one per week. Lately, it's been one per month. We've been learning which tools dig up the earth the best, and we're learning that it just takes a lot of time to keep chopping at it, to get it loose and shovel it away. So I think that's been the perfect metaphor for how this week has felt, like chipping away at a wall or a mountain. And a little bit that's how this sermon is as well. There is so much dirt that we need to dig into. There's so much of the wall. Honestly, there's more than we can sort through today. And really, I don't know if I've got it all clear in my head. It probably would have been a better sermon if I could give it on, say, Wednesday. But here we are. So I'm going to take the dirt that I see and put it in 3 different piles. Pile 1. We're going to wrestle with some of the complicated truths. Pile 2, we're going to talk about this unity thing that we're hearing everyone talk about. And pile 3, I want to address our personal and national trauma. Okay, so here's the first pile, the complicated truths. I've had all the feels this week, and a lot of them are pride and joy. We saw our first female Black, Asian, child of immigrants vice president. We saw someone acting like a president, putting our citizens before himself, calling for care and science, acknowledging the rich diversity of America, acknowledging the pain of those who have lost loved ones to the pandemic. All the things that I knew that I missed, but I didn't realize how impactful it would feel to actually see and hear it. I have so much gratitude for all of the organizers, Go Stacey Abrams, all of them who worked for free and fair elections, and all of the gains that happened in Arizona. And especially when I think of how much happened in here in Arizona that started with the reaction to SB 1070, creating activists, organizers, people dedicated to the rights of immigrants, and that extended to the rights of everyone. And the seeds that they planted in that hard Arizona dirt a decade ago are sprouting into beautiful plants now. Nationwide, we saw our first transgender state legislator, exponentially more LGBTQ, Black, Native, and female legislators all across the country. And we saw millions and millions and millions of people, the most in history, who voted despite a pandemic, despite the threats against the Postal Service and slowing down the mail, despite false claims about a rigged election. When I think about the American people who said, hell no, that is not how this works. That is not how we do this. This is not the America I believe in. And they found a way to get out and vote against all of those odds. And each individual vote was like a shovel in that hard dirt to reclaim and protect our democracy. Gives me chills. And I have joy that the man who empowered racist, xenophobic, homophobic, and transphobic thoughts gave them credibility, not created them, just to be clear, will not be able to do that from the people's house come January. I was amazed at both the American people and the media who basically ignored the calls of fraud and legal versus illegal votes and just kept counting. They just kept counting. It was like our DNA knew how to do this. Just keep counting, ignore the other voices. The counts are the counts. All of this felt like our soil was rich and would be fertile for excellent planting. But then I found a lot of stones in the soil as well. A lot of really soil that was going to need a lot of chipping away. I was one of them who wanted a landslide. I wanted a clear repudiation of the misogyny, the xenophobia, all of the racism. I wanted to hope that the first election of that person was kind of a fluke or a rejection of politics as usual, that I could understand how people just didn't know. But the sheer quantity of votes that came in made it clear that even though people knew who he was, they were okay with it. I don't believe that everyone who voted for him was racist, but his inability to condemn racism was not a deal breaker for them. I don't believe that they all hated everyone who is other than them, but the fact that it didn't disqualify him for the job was really hard to take. And like Joseph, I'm going to acknowledge my privilege. I have a lot of it. And yet, my identity as part of the queer community made me feel afraid of the people around me. It made me so disheartened that there would be people who are okay with not accepting my family, with my marriage being questioned, or worse, being nullified. And that little taste made me just even more aware of how my immigrant, Black, and transgender siblings must feel. Completely unsafe and scared, knowing that that's okay for people to affirm. The soil was very hard to break apart, and it gave me concern that the plants would never grow in it. And I went back and forth. The soil is great. The soil is awful. The soil is great. The soil is awful. I'm imagining some of you did too. So let's look at pile number 2. Unity. What is unity? President-elect Biden said last night, let's give each other a chance. It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, to lower the temperature, to see each other again, to listen to each other again. To make progress, we must stop treating our opponents as our enemy. We are not enemies. We are Americans. He said, this is a time for America, a time to heal. Okay, so let's unpack that. What does that mean, a time to heal, to come together in unity as Americans? I actually find it really interesting. I've had a lot of conversations with many of you this week, and how many of those have been about reaching out to Trump voters to seek reconciliation, understanding, and healing. And I'm not opposed to that, believe me. I think that the more we can have conversations with people and see into each other's humanity, the more we can build bridges. And I want to be very clear here. We are a congregation and a denomination that is religiously liberal, but that does not mean that we are all necessarily politically liberal. Our vision statement says that we strive to be radically inclusive. That means radical and inclusive. I honestly don't know how some Trump supporters reconcile his beliefs and our liberal theology and justice issues, but I can't hold that some people who were traditionally conservative in the small c and the smaller government and fiscal responsibility way can reconcile those two very easily. I do believe that we can reach across the electorate to help someone else understand our values of radical inclusion, justice, equity, and the worth and dignity of every single person. But I feel strongly that we can't just say we want unity and inclusion without acknowledging the role of justice. Too many of us, and I particularly mean those of us who are white and privileged, want to think of the last 4 years as a blip, that this is something that we just need to educate some people. We need to help them see the reason. We just need to love enough. We need to convince them. But our people of color know that these are not blips. These are characteristics of America. Our people of color are exhausted and worried. They know that this isn't a blip. It's the America they've been living in for decades and is finally being made visible to the rest of the country. The author John Pavlovitz said this week, if you, like Biden, have had the recurring privilege of sadly shaking your head and saying, this isn't who we are, what you really meant is, this isn't who I've ever had to see us be. What you really meant is, well, this isn't my America. Oh, wait, is it yours? So yes, let's reach out to people and build bridges. But I will not be doing it just for the sake of unity. My goal is to chip away at the rock of others so they can see our vision of collective liberation, not to reduce my vision so it can fit in with their mindset. I will be preaching my words of justice. I will be living my UU values. I will be shouting about equality and equity. And I hope that more people will understand what I've been yelling about and join me so that we can all be free. I will be a model of what more compassionate society can look like. But I will not compromise my values to make myself more palatable to people who are living in that different America. I will not choose to make myself smaller at the expense of people who have been hurt by their thoughts, their actions, and their policies. I will continue to invite them into my vision of beloved community. But I will not forsake my siblings of color who honestly delivered us this election, by the way. I will be working my tail off to make our America one that is worthy of their work. We can be gracious. We can be kind. We can be compassionate. We cannot gloat. But we should not lessen any of our ideals of justice and equity to do that. To use my dirt metaphor, which I may have dug into the ground, another dirt metaphor, this election is not the end of the digging, but it is a clear definition of the soil in which we are going to be planting. Pile 3. Our national trauma. I feel like we've been digging in this hard dirt for a long time and that we're never going to be done. This week, I'm imagining you felt a grand buffet of any or all of the following emotions: joy, sadness, relief, anxiousness, worry, despair, impatientness, anger, pride, distraction, grief, more joy, disbelief. How many more can you add? In truth, we are feeling anything and everything right now. There's a word in Spanish called zozobra. The literal definition is anxiety, but it is a particular kind of anxiety. Zozobra describes the feeling of being overwhelmed while trying to make sense of everything that's happening. One moment, everything seems normal, like, oh, what a lovely day, I'm feeling good. And then suddenly the frame shifts to reveal a world on fire, such as, a world struggling with a pandemic, a recession, climate change, political upheaval, all the things. What makes zozobra so difficult to address is that its source is not a personal failing or one particular event. Instead, it comes from cracks in the framework of meaning that we rely on to make sense of our world. It is a complicated feeling, like we're living in different realities from other parts of the world who don't wear masks, think that actions of this past administration were laudable, and just to have a different idea of what right is. Zozobra is a gnawing sense of distress and disorientation as we realize just how fragile we are. So what's the cure to zozobra? Actually, according to the people who invented and studied it, the cure is community. A community that holds you in your fullness and wholeness, regardless of what you're thinking and feeling. A community that reminds you of your ideals, and a community that reinvigorates democracy at all levels. In other words, our road towards healing our hearts and our minds and our souls is the road we walk together. Community. And probably a nap. I think our country and our world probably needs a nap. So we look at our piles of dirt. We look at the complicated layers of truth that this election has laid in front of us, the joy and the work ahead. We commit ourselves to this vision of collective liberation and healing through the work of justice and building the community that we dream of. And we take care of ourselves collectively and individually so that we can heal from this trauma and continue the work. This is a lot to hold. I'm going to borrow some thoughts from my colleague, Reverend Elizabeth Stevens. Fits perfectly into our metaphor. My beloveds, we are chipping away at a mountain, not a boulder. Calcified structures, 2,000 years of this stupid idea that some of us are more worthy. Some deserve power by virtue of who they are. Erosion is slow work, sweethearts. Celebrate the progress, the triumphs. Celebrate the heartbreaking almosts. Breathe. Rest for a time. Then get up and turn towards kindness. Turn toward your neighbor in need, toward those who are still trapped in the stone. Tell them, I won't give up. Tell them, I am with you. Tell them, for you, I will learn to eat rocks. For you, I will keep chewing, keep grinding, until the mountain crumbles to dust. So might it be. Our closing song is by the radical, wonderful, non-binary, amazing Janelle Monáe. It's Turntables. There's a quote at the beginning of the song by James Baldwin from an interview on PBS, which was included in the film I Am Not Your Negro. Baldwin is asked whether he is fundamentally a pessimist or an optimist about the future of Black America and of the US. And Baldwin begins by saying, I can't be a pessimist because I'm alive. To be a pessimist means that you have agreed that human life is an academic matter, So I'm forced to be an optimist. I'm forced to believe that we can survive whatever we must survive. Let us be optimists and realists and remember to be alive is to be together.